Howdy to you, Saints fans. I hope you are having a fantastic Tuesday evening as we're going to get into some heavy topics, and I can't wait to hear your opinions on what the New Orleans Saints should do. And, of course, we'll be talking about Pete Carmichael and the offense. If y'all missed it, that was yesterday's big film study. We released it early in the morning. And as evidence in terms of how frustrated Saints fans are, the video that I released yesterday morning, already over 10,000 views. Absolutely incredible. And all I can say is a huge, tremendous thank you to that because, well, that shows that y'all really care about the content. You enjoy the content. And even in rough moments, like Pete Carmichael moments, it shows that you love the Saints and that you are passionate about what we're doing. So I appreciate all the support. Absolutely incredible. Y'all are all amazing. Now, let's do what I like to do every time we get into this. Let's give some who-dats out to those who are here. Early Kimani. Well, look. What's going on? Kamani here at the very beginning. Who that to you? Love to see you. Michael Borland, Mr. Jarrett, Eric Howard, 992, Ras Mac. Good to see you. Rampage, Mr. Tari, Creole King, Nola Gang Warrior, the Antonio Slade Smith, Rudy Rock. I know everybody's going to be rolling through because we did put out the noti on Discord. If you haven't already, make sure you share this out. And if you're new and you found us through our work with Bleach Report, or you found us through our work with our Athletic in the past, or however you find us, welcome in. Glad that you're here. Who that to you? Welcome. Now, let's go ahead and hit some of the big talking points that I know many of you are already there with us on. Number one being, no, the New Orleans Saints are not making a change at offensive coordinator, at least not yet. Now, I am in the camp that, and I said this in both the Who Dat Confessional postgame and on Bleach Report, that the New Orleans Saints should either fire or at least at nothing else, have Ronald Curry start taking over duties, even though we don't know what he is. I mean, keep in mind that I am not trying to argue that Ronald Curry is a secret gem that's going to come in and turn this offense into a number one offense. But I do think that you can't really get worse than what the New Orleans Saints are right now. And statistically, that is true. Not sure how much y'all keep up with stats across the league. I do realize that being a fan of one team is difficult enough, but the New Orleans Saints currently are in the mid-20s when it comes to yards per game. And if you talk about points per game, the New Orleans Saints are 26th in the NFL, currently averaging 15.5 points per game, which is tied with teams like the New York Jets, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and slightly above the New England Patriots, New York Giants being the worst in the league currently, 11.5 points per game. You're not going to win a lot of games with that. Now, in terms of defensively, the New Orleans Saints are in the top 10 with allowing a respectable 17.5. You would think allowing only 17.5 points per game, the New Orleans Saints would be a winning franchise, but currently sitting at 2-2 at 500, and that is simply not the case and can't really see that changing. Now, this doesn't mean that there won't be any change ever to the offensive coordinator position, but it does mean that as of now, you are going to continue to have Pete Carmichael, if from what we've been told by Dennis Allen himself in press conferences over the past couple of days is true. Now, if a move were to be made, it would have to come from above Dennis Allen at this point, and I don't see Ms. Gale or Mickey Loomis stepping in and making that move. But that doesn't mean it can't actually happen. So what it would take, I think that if the New Orleans Saints offense continues in the current pace that it is, I would say that it becomes impossible to maintain any type of argument of Pete Carmichael being the offensive play caller for at maximum 2 more weeks if there is no improvement. Right? Now, I'm not trying to get your hopes up. I'm simply trying to speak facts because the truth is, Dennis Allen, this is his last shot. I mean, I don't see Dennis Allen getting another shot after this if his tenure in New Orleans is a failure. And by failure, I mean, if Dennis Allen leaves the New Orleans Saints with a losing record as a head coach, he's probably not getting a shot ever again to be a head coach. Now, I will say real quickly, because a lot of people, and I know even Saints people piled on him and like, oh, well, he's a 30% career head coach in terms of winning everything. Look, GMs are not looking at what he did in Oakland a decade ago. They're looking at what he's doing in New Orleans right now. And if he is not making the decisions needed to make his team better, that is going to cost him the ability to coach in this league. I'm going to go ahead and tell you the dirty truth that y'all don't want to hear. If Dennis Allen is a guy who's being 7-10 and arguing that, hey, we're right there for being a winning guy, then he's going to continue to have a role as a head coach in the NFL. If he is losing and bombing out and he's not making the decisions needed to win as a head coach, which that means that you have to control the coaching staff as well as the locker room, He's no one to lose that shot. And if he hitches his wagon to Pete Carmichael for better or for worse, I have a strong belief that it's going to be for worse. And that means that he would be relegated to being a defensive coordinator, which is nothing wrong with that. I do still believe that Dennis Allen is one of the best defensive coordinators in the NFL right now. His defense has been consistently good. But at the same time, I don't think New Orleans is trying to give him a 5-year roadmap. And I said this a couple years ago. I said when Dennis Allen inked his deal, it was really difficult to see Dennis Allen not be in New Orleans at minimum 2 years, probably 3 years if they were even around average. So this is year 2. We're obviously 4 games into it. And truthfully, Dennis Allen has not done bad as a head coach in terms of the grand scale of the NFL. Saints fans, please do not come at me. I'm not sitting here saying Dennis Allen is secretly amazing. But Dennis Allen is winning 43% of his games so far. He certainly is better than what he showed in Oakland. And teams tend to give guys like that a chance for better or for worse. I'm just speaking on historical precedent. I'm not speaking on preference. We know that he can call a great defense, but that doesn't necessarily make you a great head coach. Now, defense has improved so far this year, but defense is getting gassed. Defense is getting beat late. And even though his defense isn't perfect, for example, Alontae Taylor is still struggling to pick up the nickel spot. I don't think Taylor's doing terrible, but Tampa definitely took advantage of some of the tendencies Alontae Taylor hasn't picked up in terms of a good way. And that's okay. You're still talking about a team, as we said, that's averaging 17 and a half points allowed defensively. You're not going to gripe too much about that. And currently, right now, New Orleans Saints are second in the league in rushing touchdowns allowed, 11th in the league in rushing yards allowed. That's a drastic improvement from last year when they were 14th and 24th, respectively. So defense has improved. It comes back to the offense. And right now, Pete Carmichael is not going anywhere. But I would also say that from the people I've talked to, I have done my little rev thing. When Bleacher Report decided to invest in me and take a shot and bring me back into the fold, I said, you know what, maybe I should take this more seriously. So I'm putting out the film studies. Y'all are enjoying it. And I'm trying to work my way back into knowing things here and there. Now, I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now that I'm not the best source of New Orleans Saints information for what's happening inside the facility. But if what I am hearing from talking to a couple different people is true, there is definitely an frustration that is not just the fandom going crazy. So ignore the Dennis Allen saying, hey, the first 2 weeks nobody had a problem, and now it's a problem because we're losing. Truthfully, there is frustrations in the player base. There's obvious frustrations in the fandom. And when we talk about player evaluation, we always talk about being several games. You look forward to building a scouting report. We got 20-plus games now of Pete Carmichael by himself with multiple quarterbacks, star receivers, etc. And I think a lot of people kind of know what he is. And the biggest issue with Pete Carmichael is play calling and tendencies and how he rolls out in the field. And we covered a lot of that in yesterday's film study. Again, I hope you enjoyed it. A little bit outside my comfort zone because going after coaching tendencies is not what I typically do. Usually we're evaluating individual players and how they play and their roles and responsibilities. But I think many Saints fans, whether you are a trained scout or whether you have just been watching football for years, can see that there are struggles with Pete Carmichael. I say this all the time. When it comes to professional sports, there's 2 areas that just about anybody can spot. Anybody can spot when somebody's great, and anybody can spot when you're ass. And right now, the New Orleans Saints play calling and the offensive system is ass. And even to the point where you're making some players worse. Let me give you an example of this. Again, this is going to be a little bit of a divisive comment, but this is just me speaking from my training. Derek Carr's made to look worse than he actually is right now. Derek Carr, one of the things that he did really well in his time as a Raider was pre-snap and post-snap reads and attacking the middle of the field. Now, that doesn't mean that Derek Carr hasn't had issues. We actually covered a lot of Derek Carr's issues in the offseason, and we knew, or at least I tried to make it known, that there should be limited expectations on how well he can do. But if you looked at the film study yesterday, talking about Pete Carmichael's play calling and forcing all these plays to the boundary and the sidelines with the tightest window throws, the hardest throws to make, that's certainly not putting a quarterback who's not a top 5 quarterback in a position for success. So Derek Carr is a solid quarterback. When you have a play caller who is literally at the bottom of the league, Derek Carr looks even worse than he was signed to be. He was signed to be a top 15, maybe top 10 quarterback, and he's playing worse than that. He's playing in that top 25, top 20 range. I would argue most of that is going to come down to Pete Carmichael, but Carr's also making his own issues and his own mistakes. The only way to really improve everything as a whole, though, is to take out the biggest issue, which is the play calling issue. And whether that means Ronald Curry has an increased influence when it comes to play calling and tendencies, or whether it is they actually go and have Pete Carmichael sit his butt down, whether they bring in John Gruden, or as even Saints fans have said, bring in Drew Brees. whatever the option is, the biggest issue affecting the entire team is the coaching of the offense because it extends past Derek Carr. I mean, we got a receiver room that everybody talks about how talented they are, but you got receivers running routes on top of each other. You have receivers giving 50% effort, and you have gosh, I hate to word it like this because I never try to be that guy, but you have an offensive system of stars that don't even seem to believe in the system that they're employing right now. And that is not something that you want for a team that sees themselves, as a franchise, as a playoff caliber team. So at the moment, you're stuck with Pete Carmichael. But I think that if this continues and this persists for a couple more weeks, I don't think that Pete Carmichael remains in charge of play calling. And I think that New Orleans is going to be forced to make a change in the season, even though Dennis Allen has said that is something that they are reluctant to do, and that he personally is reluctant to do. Your next two games are away games against New England Patriots and the Houston Texans. And while we do our previews, on Thursdays, I'm not trying to get into a full-on preview of these. Let's talk about the offenses of those two different juggernauts, if you will, because I'm saying that facetiously. The New England Patriots are literally a team that averages the same amount of points as the New Orleans Saints offensively. So you talk about the struggles on offense, the Saints have the same issues, etc., coaching, performance, whatever you want to call it, execution, although those are different things. If you can't win against that team, or you can't score and you can't hold their offense back, you can't beat that team, you've got some problems. And then look at the Houston side of things. They are a team that is a top 15 offense in the league. And then you flip it to the defensive side of the ball. It's very likely that, when you get to that game against New England, they're going to be missing some of their players. But speaking defensively, how will either one of those teams do, you're going to have, again, a journey to the bottom of the league with the New England Patriots being around, 20th in terms of points allowed. They're currently averaging 24 points allowed in the league, and the Houston Texans are right in the middle at 19.8, a couple points worse than New Orleans. So again, statistically, New Orleans should have an advantage here, and playing against a team that's having similar struggles offensively should play in New Orleans' favor. But that also speaks to the other point. If you can't score against those defenses and you continue to have the same issues, whether you end up being 2-4, or even if you go 3-3 and the offense is still only averaging 15 points a game, simply no way you can't make a change, because after that, it gets a little bit tougher. You got the Jaguars, you got the Indianapolis Colts, and AR seems like he is starting to find his stride and slowly improve week in and week out. Then you got Chicago Bears, and I'm not saying that that is a gimme game at any way. It should be an easier game, but we know that New Orleans and Dennis Allen's defense has struggled against quarterbacks who have a certain level of mobility. Then you got the Vikings and Kirk Cousins, who loves facing the New Orleans Saints, and then you go into a Falcons team that definitely wants to take down New Orleans. Then you got Detroit Lions. What I'm saying is this whole New Orleans schedule is soft is all preseason bullshit. Okay, the schedule is not soft. You got some real players that are coming through. Now, there might not be teams that you're used to calling players, but that's the beauty of the NFL is every week and every season, somebody can beat you and some team can improve. So we are looking at a league where you do need to actually respect an up-and-coming Colts team and a Jaguars team, and you do need to respect a Detroit Lions team, whereas before maybe we were only talking about the Rams and the 49ers and the Eagles, and still need to respect them too. New Orleans has got to play well to make those things happen, so we'll just simply have to see where it goes from there. We talk about Pete Carmichael even originally not wanting to be the OC. It said he had stepped down 2 years ago, and it makes you wonder how New Orleans managed to fumble the bag when it comes to Eric Bieniemy and when it comes to Doug Peterson. Imagine having those guys in the facility and then looking over at Pete Carmichael and going, "Yeah, we're good." I can't imagine that mentality, but that's where we are today. And I understand that Pete Carmichael still probably has some things that he does well. Be very clear, I don't think that Pete Carmichael is a secret scrub in the NFL. I do think that he can game plan well. I do think that he can set a vision well during the week. But clearly, the issue is the play calling in the actual games themselves. We got to see some level of change happen if you truly want to see the New Orleans Saints take it to another level. I know it's cliche, but honestly, it feels true. And I'm not alone in that, by the way, because not only do I call for this, I ended up finding out with Lance Moore, who is an analyst with WDSU. He said the same thing following the game after I did my podcast. I was going back, listening to some of the other opinions, make sure that maybe I'm not jaded, because truthfully, even though I've gotten to cover this team professionally for years, and I've gotten to work with the team, I've gotten to work with other teams, it's still my team. Like the Saints have always been, since my childhood, my team. So that means that I can be inherently biased. Well, when you see other analysts saying it, and even former players coming out and, Saints Hall of Fame members saying, hey, this guy is cheeks. Well, that kind of gives me a little bit of confirmation that maybe I am seeing what I'm actually seeing. So that means that New Orleans is in a very critical time right now. And anybody that watched the post game with Alvin Kamara, he was very just visibly frustrated, agitated with this offense. And he said that there needs to be some tough conversations. Now, obviously, he's a professional. He did not expound on that. He did not throw Pete Carmichael specifically under the bus. And, I wouldn't want him to. But I do think that him as a leader, and I do think that if you've watched Alvin Kamara over the past couple of years, he's certainly grown as a leader in that locker room and in the franchise itself. That frustration is going to turn into conversations, and I hope he's there leading some of those conversations, because one of the biggest issues in that play calling game was Alvin Kamara, who got fantastic touches. And I thought that he made some good opportunities with the limited touches that he had in terms of running, and then the really weird touches he had in the receiving game. Because imagine using Alvin Kamara only within 5 yards and 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage. Like, imagine having a talent of an Alvin Kamara, even if he is in the later part of his career, theoretically. Imagine saying, hey, your route is go over that sideline, stand 1 yard in front of the line of scrimmage, and wait. That's terrible game planning for a guy who is arguably your best overall player on offense. So he's frustrated, and we see the receivers frustrated. We definitely see the receivers running the weirdest route concepts I have seen in this offense in a long time. It doesn't make any sense. There's no cohesion. I was even talking to Nick Underhill. We both look at this and go, this doesn't even make sense. Like, even if you want to try to work out what the overall plan is, it just doesn't work and doesn't fit. So now we need to see how it rolls out. Warrior says y'all need to watch week one's game up until Carr got hurt. Carr was not good enough to play. Y'all talking trash when Carr was getting better and still doing enough to win. Warrior strong disagree. Carr was not good enough to play. I think Carr looks great in terms of what his expectations are, unless I'm misunderstanding what you're saying. I do not think that Carr is an issue. I don't think Carr is an issue. Is Carr playing at an elite level? No, but I never expected that. I don't think Carr is an issue. I think the issue is play calling, and play calling is making everybody worse. Chris Olave is a stud in this league. Let's take Derek Carr out of the conversation. Why is Chris Olave's routes basically resulting him getting 6 targets, 1 catch, 4 yards? And even though Olave certainly needs to be reprimanded for some of the lazy route running he had, a lot of the routes he ran aren't even what he does really well. Chris Olave worked very hard over the offseason to improve his ability as a yards after reception type of receiver. He said that was the biggest area that he needed to improve in his game. And I think he did a lot to do that. And then they don't run anything that actually gets him open. There are no rub routes to get Chris Olave open underneath to, get some big yardage. There are no routes except for the occasional deep post route to get him over the top of a defense where he's able to utilize his athletic ability. So all this to me comes back to the original point, which is why we're really harping on this and almost beating a dead horse to this point, that Pete Carmichael is a problem when it comes to calling this offense. And I think you're going to see continual struggles. Now, there are positives. Trevor Penning is improving. If we want to talk about positives in this game and then talk about can the offense get better, I think with the return of Alvin Kamara, you did see the running game really return to its original form with the outside zone running. You see a better level of comfortability there. And I think that is going to make things better. Trevor Penning is growing game to game. And while Trevor Penning is nowhere near a Pro Bowl level, he is certainly drastically improved. We love to see that. We are praising that because that is fantastic. Anders Pete, hope he comes back from his concussion. Clearly a superior left guard to this day than James Hurst, which is, I guess, a negative and a positive. But, hey, either way, you got depth. Eric McCoy, solid. Cesar Reese hopefully comes back, was playing really well early on. And then Ryan Ramczyk, if you have consistency along that O-line, again, you're coming out your best game in week 4 in that area. So I don't think that the week 4 game you saw the offensive line suddenly be great, but they certainly weren't bottom of the league. They'd finally reached that middle ground, and hopefully they continue to improve and grow and get better in that regard as well. Dupree says that reverse sweep on the first possession was egregious. Why would you even have an injured Carr, part of a reverse sweep like that, thinking he's a threat? That ended up as a 10-yard loss, which is bigger drive killer than a holding penalty. So here's my thoughts. And this is actually it's a microcosm of everything I have wrong with Pete Carmichael. A pop pass reverse as a play concept, I love. I love that. I love a pop pass reverse call. It's aggressive, it's confusing, it uses motion, and even if it gives you a couple yard loss or a few yard gain, it forces the defense to respect you having a multifaceted approach. But here's the problem with it, because the play call then has to be dissected in how it was run. Nobody's going to believe that Derek Carr's taking a handoff to the left side, especially with an injury. So nobody even respects that's going to happen. Your key run blocker in this situation was rookie wide receiver Bowden in the slot with a crackback block against a linebacker, the best positional group for the Tampa Bay defense. You have a rookie wide receiver on a crackback responsibility, and then your lead blocker was Taysom Hill. No offense, Taysom Hill. The call is fine. The personnel and the way that you designed it is absolute garbage. If anybody's supposed to be faking the reverse and going to the opposite side, it's Taysom Hill or Rashid Shaheed. Anybody besides Derek Carr. Absolutely no reason why anybody's going to fear Derek Carr suddenly galloping off into the left side of the field. So the call, in terms of like this play existing in your playbook, I have no issue with. But as soon as you have a rookie wide receiver having no business as the primary crackback block, when, by the way, Jimmy Graham has some amazing blocks over the past couple weeks. You never thought we'd say that in our lifetime. Jimmy Graham has been killing it as a blocker, certainly better than what he was years ago. You've got even veterans in Keith Kirkwood who can block better than a rookie wide receiver. And look, I give him credit for the effort. It wasn't like Bowden was out there just not trying. He's simply not, what he did was, if you haven't seen the play, I don't have it to throw up on the screen real quick. He threw a shoulder block into a linebacker, and it didn't really do anything. Surprise, surprise, a wide receiver who's barely 200 pounds isn't able to move a linebacker on a crackback block by throwing a shoulder at him. So again, it comes back to even the plays that aren't a terrible design, as in I don't have a problem with the pop pass reverse. I actually love that aggressiveness. I praise offensive coordinators who play that aggressive style. The way you lined it up is just utterly, I hate to say this because, I always worry that, it's a couple of the sources I do have with the team are going to listen to this podcast and be like, I can't talk to him anymore, but I just keep it 100. It's stupid. It makes no sense. It's horrible play design. And I even said this on Twitter. It's not an NFL offense right now, as in what you're seeing right now from a play calling standpoint is not to the caliber of what you expect from an NFL offensive play caller. And that's also why I admittedly have given the offense a little bit of slack. Like, I'm not as hard on Derek Carr as I could be. I'm not as hard on Chris Olave and Michael Thomas as I could be. I'm not as hard on, Jamal Williams and Kendre Miller as I could be, because a lot of the play calling is just bad. It's really awful. And, again, if you're, whether you're pro Carr, anti Carr, whether you're pro Kamara, anti Kamara at this point in his career because he's, in his 8th year in the league, it doesn't really matter. I think if you watch videos like yesterday or read articles that have come out, from various different reporters, because it's not just me, by the way. I know Sports Illustrated has articles out about this, and I've written, or I've made videos about it. I've done content for Bleacher. It's everywhere, right? Everybody sees it. And you've got Saints Hall of Famers coming forth and saying this is garbage. You've got players who are visibly frustrated in their meetings over this. So it's not just us. And again, the pressure is on Pete Carmichael. Now, Dennis Allen has said that the pressure is known and obvious, as in, Pete knows he's the problem. My only question is, well, knowing the problem is only half the battle. What is being done to actually fix the problem? That is something that I want to know the answer to. And, as much as it is good to get on these podcasts and vent with you, the amazing Who Dat Nation, I don't have any control over it. You don't have any control over it. And it's different from any field I've worked in, because in other fields, like, you can get a group of people frustrated enough and you can exact, revenge or enforce change. You can't really do that here with an NFL team. They have all the control and all the power, and we're forced to simply sit by and watch. But in terms of positives, we have seen some improvements in terms of individual play, and that is great. And on the defensive side, we've seen improvements as well. The rookie in Brian Breezy, as I like to call him, because I want to speak Hall of Fame over his life. He's not playing at a high-end level, but he's certainly flashing early on, which we love to see. Now, I will go ahead and say, stymie some of your excitement, because a lot of his best plays come when, he's running the twist stunt game and they're opening up space for him, which is fine, by the way. That's not a knock on him. He's a rookie. He's allowed to have help. He's allowed to have people working him into it. But the dude's 4 games in, has a sack and a half, 4 QB hits, and 3 tackles for loss. He is certainly playing above expectations for a rookie, even though a lot of his big plays are due to him getting, situations provided for him, and that's completely okay. I have no issue with that. For example, what do I mean when I'm saying that? Well, his sack that came in the game against Tampa. Well, the credit, if you want to give credit to like who made that sack happen, well, he makes the sack, but the person who made it happen was Demario Davis, right? And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. You're providing opportunities for the young guy to go and make a play, and he's certainly getting better that he's starting to win his one-on-ones more and more. That's something that, as a Saints fan, you should be excited about because you have a first-round pick coming in and immediately being responsive a year after you had a first-round pick coming in and being immediately responsive to Chris Olave. And last year's first-round pick is actually coming in and being immediately responsive this year, even if it's a year late, and Trevor Penning. So that makes me really happy and excited. And I'll look at that and go, well, okay, even though crap is really bad over there on the sidelines, at least this right here is improving, and you are seeing some things grow. And that is really nice to watch. Right? We want to see more of that. And that way, when you do have a down game, and, Lattimore did not have a strong game early on against Evans. I think Lattimore had a stronger game towards the end of the game, but they stopped really going after Lattimore. It's like, all right, well, we don't have our best wide receiver, so we'll go back to what's always worked. And what's always worked is Chris Godwin being a slot guy, absolutely demolishing the middle of the field. And surprise, surprise, they started targeting Alontae Taylor, and that worked. So all these things that are going on, this is the chess match of football. And again, this goes back to me not worrying as much about the defensive side of things, but offense. Now, Randall says, I listen to you because you keep it real and call it like it is. I appreciate it, but let's be honest, Derek Carr isn't the answer long-term at quarterback. I don't think anybody said he was or thinks he is, Randall. See, my thing, Randall, is when I see those arguments, nobody's making that argument. Like, New Orleans isn't making that argument. Now, that doesn't mean that Derek Carr can't be. Like, Derek Carr could be here 8 years, right? He could. But New Orleans does not say that he's the long-term answer. New Orleans paid him to be a bridge quarterback. How do I know that? Because this is not going after anybody individually. Saints fans get so enamored, and it's not just Saints fans, by the way, it's football fans. Saints fans get enamored by these large contract numbers, right? Derek Carr is the 13th highest paid quarterback in the NFL by year as of this year. By next year, he'll be probably out of the top 15. Okay? By average per year, he is 13th. Derek Carr was not paid as a guy that they believe is the long-term future. They paid him as a guy that they see as a top 15 to top 10 quarterback. They did not pay him as an elite guy, and they did not invest in him as if they believe that he's going to be here 8 to 10 years. And that doesn't mean that Derek Carr can't do it, because there's a difference between, just signing a guy and saying, hey, you have an opportunity to prove yourself, but we don't believe in you enough to say you are the guy. All right? It's two different things. They didn't say that about Derek Carr, right? Derek Carr signed a $150 million contract, but only $60 million guaranteed, and his average per year puts him at 13th. I mean, he earns less per year than Matt Stafford, Daniel Jones, Deshaun Watson, Kyler Murray. He averages less per year than those guys. So, again, it just comes back to perspective, right? And can Derek Carr prove that he's the guy? Sure. Do any of us have enough film on Derek Carr, especially a healthy Derek Carr through 4 games, to say he is a long-term option in New Orleans? No. All I can do is tell you that I've seen enough film to say that he's not the biggest problem on this team, and the biggest problem is the one who's telling Derek Carr what to do. Right? And Randall says we have no exit from Carr until 2025. Yeah, welcome to normal NFL. When you don't have a Hall of Fame quarterback, you have what's called a bridge quarterback. That bridge quarterback can be young enough to be a guy who becomes your long-term option, or you pay a guy to be here 2, 3, 4 years to be your quarterback. Welcome to regularity, everybody. Welcome to what it's like to be a normal NFL franchise, again, because you haven't experienced it in 15 years. This is just normal. Like, you have to go out and sign a guy. You don't go out and get the worst potential quarterback. You try to find somebody who's good enough, and then you work around it, right? And then every now and then those teams make it to the Super Bowl. Shout out to Sexy Rexy in 2006, with the Chicago Bears. Right? These things happen. And for New Orleans to get better, they have to hope that their elite players, the ones that they do have, step up enough to cover any deficiencies. And I think, let's keep on the Derek Carr thing, because I do think that Derek Carr is a guy that, again, can be a guy that is successful and you win with, but I also acknowledge his deficiencies. I've never seen Derek Carr as a top 5 quarterback. Now, if Sean Payton were here, I think Derek Carr might have a legitimate shot to be in that analytic area of top 5. I really do. And I've always said that I believe in Sean Payton as that. And if you don't believe in Sean Payton, just go look what he just did to Russell Wilson from last year to this year. Now, that defense in Denver is abysmally bad. It's like the 2015 Saints defense all over again. But in terms of quarterbacks and offense, there goes Sean Payton again, knowing what he's doing. But if you're going to have a quarterback successful, you got to at least play to his strengths. And Derek Carr's strengths were always the ability to utilize wide receivers and tight ends over the middle of the field. Well, that's not what the Saints do at all right now. Literally, the Saints aren't doing that. I did a whole field study. I know I'm plugging the hell out of myself. I'm so sorry, but I'm not. Go watch yesterday's film study just on third downs. Consistently, third down after third down, whether it was 3rd and 1 or 3rd and 7, out routes and corner routes to the sidelines, and that's all we're running. Imagine having Chris Olave, one of the most premier athletes and premier talents at wide receiver, and telling him to go run a 5-yard speed out, and that's it, right? So if you're going to have a quarterback in Derek Carr who is more limited in terms of how successful he can probably be long-term, you better put him in the best possible situation to make him as successful as he can be. And Pete Carmichael clearly is not doing that. And I think the best way to phrase Derek Carr is exactly what Sparks says. Carr is good enough to be the quarterback. The problem is he's being chopped at the knees, so to speak, by the awfulness of the play caller. And keep in mind that I had the same issues last year with Pete Carmichael when Andy Dalton was the quarterback, when Jameis Winston was the quarterback. I've said very clearly, I don't believe that Jameis Winston has got the most fair, clear shot in New Orleans. It's not like I'm just trying to raise a banner for Derek Carr. I think we've had a long-lasting problem for a while now. Not to mention that AC joint's not 100%, and it was very clear from the field. But anyway, let's get into some of y'all's comments. I do want to make sure that this show always is a show for Who Dat Nation, and y'all can get y'all's opinions and thoughts in. And sure, I'll give mine on top of it, but still, we want to see. Antonio says, why is Prentice getting so much playing time? That third down play where he missed the pass lost me. Tony Jones, Hill, or Kamara all could have been in there. So the answer why, Antonio, is pretty simple. The answer simply comes down to protecting the quarterback. And what they've been doing more of is, because they've had those offensive line issues, they've been keeping in him as an extra blocker. Now, in terms of how much he actually played the game, might surprise you a little bit, but Adam Prentice is not like he was in every snap of the game. Adam Prentice was in on, here, I'll go ahead and give you the exact snap numbers, 14%. He was in 9 out of 65 snaps. That's it. Now, here's the problem. In those 9 snaps, he had a clear drop on a third down pass, which one, play design again, but Derek Carr tried to make something happen when there was nothing. So kudos to Carr on that one play. Adam Prentice drops it. That leads to a punt. And then Adam Prentice comes in and fumbles. So in 2 plays, he had 2 critical, game-changing, and drive-killing plays. But he's only in there 9 snaps, right? Tony Jones Jr. was in there 11 snaps. Alvin Kamara played 49 snaps. That's just how bad Adam Prentice was in that game. 9 snaps, and he had 2 game-altering plays. Crazy. So, and again, that just kind of speaks to how poorly, some of this execution is for the team. And I do appreciate Dennis Allen saying this, because Dennis Allen was asked, is it an execution problem? Is it a coaching problem? And he says, if we were to blame it all on execution, that'd be a scapegoat. He's openly saying it's clearly not just players not executing. And I respect him for at least saying that much. I really do. There's an issue with this offense's just core design. I have an issue with that. Why do they have so many passes at or behind the line of scrimmage? Again, this just goes back to what I'm talking about, Glads. The issue is the person calling the plays. Alvin Kamara's deepest route was about 5 yards. There was no deep, Texas concept. Texas concept, for those who remember, is an angle route out of the backfield. You're going to shoot towards the sideline and then break inside, get underneath the linebacker, and go to the hole area of the defense. There was no wheel route for Alvin Kamara to go down the sidelines and be available for a deep pass. They did give one to Taysom Hill, but they didn't give it to Alvin Kamara, which Alvin Kamara, that's one of the plays that you've come to know him to, like, wow, Alvin Kamara is a decent slot receiver. They didn't call him any plays. That's not Kamara's fault. It's not Carr's fault. It's not the offensive line's fault. It's not any blocking wide receiver's fault. Goes right back to Pete Carmichael. How do you have probably, arguably, your best offensive playmaker never targeted past 5 yards from the line of scrimmage? Almost every target he had was right at the line of scrimmage. And by the way, Dennis Allen also commented on this. He said that he said that Alvin Kamara's 13 receptions for 33 yards is a little misleading because he had multiple receptions for negative 13 yards behind the line of scrimmage that throws that stat off. Well, hell, that actually speaks more to the problem. Why are we throwing the ball behind, pop pass? Why are we doing things behind the line of scrimmage that don't have a chance for success? So it's clear that the issues that we're bringing up are being discussed and recognized. Now, here's the problem. Recognizing is not enough. It's step one, right? Admitting you have a problem is step one. Then you actually have to work on the problem. You have to go through the steps. I've never been through AA, but I've heard of the steps. We've all seen them posted somewhere. You just got to acknowledge the problem. That's step one. Now you got a lot more to do to fix all these different issues, right? 992 says, why do you have a fullback? No one uses fullbacks anymore. Fullbacks have always been used in New Orleans West Coast offense, and they've actually started to make a bit of a return as offenses have gone more back to a heavier set and a heavier style running back when for about a decade, everything had gone really by committee, speed backs, shorter, shiftier guys like the Darren Sproles. He wasn't the only one. And now a lot of teams are shifting more towards a little bit larger, more power, bringing back those 21 personnel groupings and things like that. And the NFL just goes through phases, right? And that's the case with this sport, whether it be defense, offense. There are new things that come out. Don't get me wrong. New things do happen all the time. But at the same time, there's still nothing new under the sun. And you will go through cycles because when defenses adjust to you being smaller, speedier, faster by them getting speedy, fasty linebackers that are 230 pounds, well, now we know that if you got a 230-pound linebacker and I got a 230-pound running back, I'm going to wear that dude down. I'm going to hurt him because I'm going to run over him. I'm going to beat him up. I'm going to have a fullback that goes and takes him out. So then you're going to see in a few years where linebackers are going to go back to being that style that maybe you remember as a kid. Now the best linebacker in the league is back to being 6'4", 255 pounds, and runs a 4.5. He's not the fastest guy in the world, but he's mentally smart, and he brings a hammer, right? NFL goes through cycles. I have no issue with there being a fullback on the team. I only have an issue when the fullback's fumbling and not catching critical plays. That's when I have an issue. So, Dupree says, I'm not sure Prentice deserves most of the blame when Pete has horrible play calling. No, I will still blame Prentice for his two massive mistakes. There's no escaping it. The man fumbled inside the 5 after a critical interception and then just basically gave them a touchdown, and then he ruined a drive that actually had potential to move down the field and at least get another field goal because, hey, what's worse than losing 26-12? 26-9. That's worse. That's worse. So, Amy says, Pete started the game Taysom a quarterback with Carr fullback, AK out wide, and Taysom handing it off to Carr, that handed it off to AK. Running reverse for 10-yard loss, make it make sense. We already talked about that earlier, Hemi, but just repeating it back to you because, yeah, we've all agreed that the call itself, as in that play existing, not a problem, but how they ran it just really eat up was stupid. Hit every stick down the stupid tree as you fell. Just didn't make any sense. Didn't make any sense at all. Oh, man. Oh, most teams now use a tight end instead of a fullback as well. No, they don't. No, they're bringing back fullback 992. I don't know where you saw that. Yes, people will use tight ends as an H-back. New Orleans has done that forever. That's what Taysom Hill does. But no, fullbacks have been making a return pretty consistently. And usually if you use a tight end, it's because you don't have a proper fullback. And again, cycles. I have no issue with New Orleans having an actual fullback. I have no issue with that at all. Right? That's not a problem. I think the play calling is a problem. The personnel sets probably aren't, in my opinion. You can have an opinion that it is. I don't have an opinion that's an issue. Who dat, Miss Pammy? How you doing? Do you think we'll look better Sunday? I don't have I'm going to be real with you. No, I don't. I think that could it be better in terms of could this one game be better? Yes. This one singular game could be better. But will Pete Carmichael ever be a high-end OC? I don't think so. I don't. I don't think that the man who's been doing this for 2 decades and now is in his 3rd year of complete control running an offense is ever going to be different than he is. Can he be better? Yeah, but let me just keep it to you straight. You can't be much worse, okay? When your passing game averages 3.5 yards per attempt, when you score 9 points as an offense, you can't really get worse. So can the offense be better Sunday? Yeah, they can. And Pete Carmichael's been better than that offense before. But will it ever be great? under Pete Carmichael. I really don't see it happening. Pete Carmichael is a bottom 5, at best bottom 10 offensive coordinator. Now let me add in, because I kind of talked about this on Twitter last night. To be clear, Pete Carmichael's not alone, y'all. Matt Canada is also awful. Okay? The Cincinnati Bengals, who've invested in their offensive line, who've got Jamar Chase, who have Joe Mixon, who have Joe Burrow, are doing worse statistically than the New Orleans Saints. Now, people are going to argue that they went to a Super Bowl and everything, and that's fine. That doesn't change what they're doing right now. So it's not like Pete Carmichael's alone. Finding a good offensive coordinator is hard. Here's why it's hard. Because the best offensive minds in the NFL very quickly become head coaches. That's why it's an issue. And if you notice, these teams that have bad OCs, they tend to have defensive head coaches. Because the biggest issue is, for whatever reason, in the league right now, the best or quickest to sign head coaches, the ones that go up, become head coaches from offensive sides very quickly. You know, so that means it's tough to find the OCs, or you're taking risk on young guys and new guys. And that's why I also have no issue with Ronald Curry. You've been training Ronald Curry for years. So Antonio says Pete was interviewed once outside of New Orleans. He wasn't hired. Pete's been interviewed multiple times outside of New Orleans, but never hired. He was interviewed by the Lions. He was interviewed by the Jaguars. I think there's one other team that interviewed Pete. He's just never been hired outside of New Orleans. But that's the issue, right? It's not easy to find a good OC, because the good OCs immediately become a head coach. And you've already got a head coach in Dennis Allen. Now, if you want to make the argument out there that Dennis Allen should be fired so that you can go bring in a great OC and hope you find a good DC, cool. I'm not going to argue with the strategy that you want to employ. I'm simply saying that it's not like Pete's alone there. This is the difficulty of having a great defensive head coach right now. Finding an offensive counterpart is way harder than finding a defensive counterpart to a great offensive coach. It is harder to find a great OC to pair with a great defensive head coach than it is to do the reverse. Sean Payton is going to have a much easier job recreating and rebuilding that defense that's complete cheeks right now in Denver than New Orleans does rebuilding this offense with a great defense in New Orleans. That's just my opinion on, how things are in the NFL. Now, that doesn't mean it can't change in the future, but that's how they are today. And it be like it be. So Paul says, new quarterback and players, and the offense still resembles last year. Pete's the problem, and Dennis Allen's loyalty will get him fired. Quite possibly. And I don't even know why Dennis Allen is super loyal to Pete Carmichael, to be honest with you. I don't know why there's loyalty there. But it is what it is. It is what it is. So, friends, thank you for supporting the channel. Can we hire the Tampa Bay Bucks offensive coordinator? We have more talent than the Bucks offense, yet their players are maximized with good scheme, and we aren't even close. The short answer is no, you can't. You cannot hire a coach from another team for the same position that he already has. That's called a lateral move. Tampa would get that phone call and say, ha, and hang up. The only way to poach a coach from an opposing team is to offer them a promotion. You cannot block a promotionary hire. So if you were to say, hey, I really like the offensive coordinator for Tampa, you would have to offer him the head coaching position to prevent Tampa from being able to say no. You cannot go and say, hey, that OC, bring him here. He's going to be my OC now. You have to either get permission for the team or that man's contract has to be up. So no, you can't. You can't go do that. So if you wanted that, you would have to say, hey, get rid of every coach, because if you fire a head coach, basically the entire system gets cleaned out. It's very weird that that didn't happen in New Orleans when Dennis Allen took over. You didn't see a mass exodus of a lot of the guys. I understand the defensive guys staying, but it was really weird that the offense basically stayed the same coaching staff-wise. But yeah, you can't just go up and grab somebody. You can't just go up and grab somebody. Mr. O says, but if the Saints get Gruden, that would mean the entire staff will be gone and Gruden might draft another quarterback. I'll be honest. I don't want John Gruden as my head coach. I don't. And I wouldn't necessarily mind in terms of football ability. I'm not going to get into some of the other stuff. And if you don't want John Gruden coaching the Saints, I understand. But in terms of football ability, I wouldn't mind Gruden as an offensive coach. But I'll tell you right now, John Gruden coming in right now in week 5 wouldn't be able to do you any help anyway, because this is not his offense. And contrary to what you'll see on the social media streets, one West Coast offense is not another. So you can't just come in and be John Gruden and say, oh, this is a West Coast offense, and all suddenly you can run that offense effectively and perfectly versus the guy that was here. It is not the same thing. So just because you're all that a West Coast offense means is a West Coast offense is a style of offense. Usually, this is going to sound ironic to y'all, but West Coast offenses usually utilize speed, misdirection, and short, quick passes. Yeah, I know, right? But they also, the West Coast system is based on a terminology set, just like Earnhardt Perkins is a terminology set. The Saints offense is not just a pure West Coast from Bill Walsh's days in 1989. It has air raid concepts in it. It has vert passing concepts from Air Coryell that get used at different times. So John Gruden couldn't just come in and say, this is a West Coast offense, I'm going to run it perfect. That just doesn't work like that. The only realistic, in my opinion, options to come in if you needed somebody to be the OC right now that isn't named Pete Carmichael is Ronald Curry and Doug Marrone, and that's it. I don't think there's a realistic option outside of that. Now, I'm not opposed to New Orleans getting a new OC. I'm just simply saying if you needed to swap somebody out right now, that's really your only realistic options, in my opinion. That's the only realistic option. That doesn't mean you can't do something else. I just don't see it being realistic to have anybody come in right now and change this team. Now, it has happened before that coordinators get fired or demoted mid-season. In fact, Sean Payton had that happen to him. With the 2000 New York Giants, he had play calling duties stripped from him when he was an OC with the Giants. So it has happened before. It's not like it's unheard of, but it's unlikely. It's unlikely. Again, I'm not saying that I think that Pete Carmichael should be straight fired. I do believe that he contributes in terms of game planning and during the week to this team. And I know that it's hard to see that because we're all frustrated with things that are happening right now. And those frustrations are legitimate. But I do think that he has a mind for game planning. And the reason I say that because Drew Brees and Sean Payton have both said it verbatim that Pete Carmichael's strength is game planning. But game planning is not play calling. Those are two different things. Play calling and having tendencies and knowing what to do in a game, seeing the defenses live is very different than preparing for that team. So I do think that Pete Carmichael, if he was stripped of play calling duties, still has value to this team. But I don't think that he has value as the play caller. I think that is very clearly a struggle position right now. Dre says, did Nick Saldiveri play Sunday? He did not. Nick Saldiveri did not play Sunday. He was not one of the scratches, but he did not play. Let me verify that. I'm going to look at the snap counts real quick just to make sure I'm not talking out of my butt. But no, because when you did have the injury to Andres Pete, Max Garcia came in to play guard, and he was in there for 19 snaps. Saldiveri did not play on offense this past game. Now, again, I love Saldiveri. Saldiveri only really comes in on special team snaps right now. Saldiveri needs time to develop. I'm excited about him, but he needs time to develop. Mike says, am I thinking this right? A new OC needs training camp and an install of the offense. But promoting Curry, they'd be changing hats with him not rewriting the offense. He could use the exact same playbook. Exactly. That's why that's a realistic option, because Ronald Curry is here when this offense has been, crafted and developed for this season. He's here for the install. He's here for all the terminology. He has all the plays known and memorized. He would simply be in charge of calling them and when to call them and how. And by the way, this is what makes a great coach offensively a great coach. Because right now, I'll tell you right now, all the disrespect we're throwing to Pete Carmichael could take the 150 people who are watching me live and me. We could combine all 151 of us, and we would not be as good as Pete Carmichael is in terms of understanding offensive X's and O's. That's just a fact. If you disagree with me, the only way that you were right is if you actually played the New Orleans Saints or something, and you're just lurking in the chat. But what makes a great head coach is the ability, what makes a great offensive coach is the ability in a game to understand what defenses are doing and then dictate what they are going to do, because you are good at breaking tendencies or setting tendencies and knowing when to call certain plays and who to exploit and who to take advantage of. And one of the best names in the business is, let's not talk about Sean Payton. If you want to see a guy who is elite at that, go look at Shanahan with the 49ers. Shanahan, he will take plays that he's had in his playbook for years, and he will change them week to week based on his opponent, specifically to call one play in the third quarter to take advantage of one matchup he knows he's going to see. There is an elite level of mind when it comes to play calling in the NFL. and not everybody's there. And that's the difference between a great OC and a regular OC. A regular OC and a great OC can both probably come up with great plays. But the person who is elite is the one who knows when to call them, how to call them, and how to run that offense throughout the game. And I just think clearly Pete is not on that level, right? And I don't think Pete is ever going to get on that level. But I still know that Pete knows ball. And that's key. And anytime I say the things that I'm saying, and I do clearly state my opinion that he is not beneficial to the team and he should be replaced, I still think he knows ball. I still think he can contribute, but I think that when it comes to who should be in charge of what New Orleans is doing on third down, it shouldn't be Pete Carmichael. My thoughts. So Hill says, our coach isn't mean enough to light the fire in players. I'll be honest, Hills have eyes. Being a mean coach does not mean anything. It does not make you good or a bad coach. I don't think that does anything for anybody, especially when you're talking about these are grown men. If you are like just mean or disrespectful to grown men, they are not going to respect you and they're not going to play hard for you. We're not talking about, some junior high coach yelling at little boys to make them work harder. We're talking about these are grown adults doing a job. And just like you don't want your boss yelling at you in your cubicle, you don't want somebody yelling at you either. So I don't think being mean has anything to do with anything. I just think that this team needs to be better in terms of how good they are at their job, specifically the people on the sidelines. So Lame says Texans have a better passing offense than us. Now, who has the most skilled players on offense? Clearly, Pete is the problem. And this is an existing and pervasive theme, right? I mean, a lot of Saints fans have this opinion, and I agree with them. And real quick, by the way, if you haven't, TJ, if you wouldn't mind, drop the link to the Discord. If y'all haven't joined the Discord, please do. If you haven't followed me on Twitter, it's at RevDeuceWyndham. I do need to put out a film study for y'all tomorrow, and I'm just going to say I would like tomorrow's film study to be a positive. What do y'all want to see that's a good thing? And it doesn't have to be that way if y'all don't want to. We can do Alvin Kamara's first game back. We can do Brian Brzee, I want to call him Brian Breezy, but everybody keeps correcting me. Like, can you not just enjoy what I'm trying to do with that name? Y'all need to let me know who you want to see on film for tomorrow's film study. I am doing 2 to 3 film studies a week. I've been doing it pretty consistently. I'm proud of myself. We've been giving y'all lots of content. So we're going to continue with that. Hemi says, Lance Moore spoke highly of Curry. He just needs a shot at being an OC. Again, and I said the same thing on both the shows Sunday, on the Bleacher Report show, and I said the same thing on the Who Dat Confessional podcast. I think that, Curry has worked his way to be in that position. He just needs to be given the opportunity to fail or succeed. And to be clear, there's no guarantee Curry's going to come out and do amazing. But he at least deserves the opportunity at this point. He deserves the opportunity. They gave him play calling duties in the preseason. He was the wide receivers coach. Then he became the quarterbacks coach and the passing game coordinator. He's already working his way up to being an OC, whether it's in New Orleans or somewhere else. Give him a shot. Do you believe a team with a defensive head coach can ever have a good OC long term if they get hired by other teams? Short answer is no. Now, it is possible to have a defensive-minded head coach and then have a good offensive system for years. I mean, a good example of that is actually Bill Belichick. Now, for anybody that's going to say anything, yeah, Bill Belichick had a Hall of Fame quarterback. Hey, guess what? So did New Orleans. But Bill Belichick is a defensive guy, has always been a defensive guy, but yet they have a system that they've employed, and they've been able to be successful for the most part with that system for a long time. They are finally starting to kind of fall apart, it seems, offensively now. But, I mean, whether it was Tom Brady or Matt Castle or, not, I don't want to say Bridget, but Brissett, it doesn't matter who they've had. Bledsoe, they've had a successful system because Bill basically said, hey, here's what we want to run. You design inside this framework. You can have success there. Another example of success that you can have, again, not happening right now, Pittsburgh Steelers. Mike Tomlin is a defensive-minded coach, but that doesn't mean you can't have a good OC and consistently have a good OC. An example of a guy who was, in my opinion, a good, up-and-comer, I guess you could call him, would be look at the Steelers and Randy Fichtner. He was the offensive coordinator for them for, I think, 3 years. And before that, he was their quarterbacks coach and their wide receivers coach for almost a decade, right? And he worked his way up. And he was an offensive coordinator in college for like 10 years before finally getting a shot in the NFL. And then when he was with Pittsburgh, his offense ranked like what was in your points? Let's see, it was 6, 27, and 12. So it wasn't amazing, but they had success. And that 2019 year, the year they struggled the most, was a year that there were a lot of issues there. They still went 8-8, but that was when Mason Rudolph was the quarterback and Delvin Hodges and stuff, and Ben Roethlisberger wasn't really around. So, that was a drop-off point. But I think you can find it, but you're probably not going to find it for 10 years, as if you have an offensive-minded head coach. So there's going to be struggles either way. Appreciate it's good film study, Blake Groupie, or another offensive line. I've just done a lot of offensive line, so I'm hesitant to do more of it. I mean, if it's what the people want, I'll do offensive line, right? And I do what y'all do because y'all pay the bills. Y'all feed my 3 kids. People like Crayons, Antonio, appreciate who do Super Chats. The people who come through on Venmo, PayPal, Cash App to donate, all of that helps out. So I do appreciate all of it, and I'll do whatever it is that y'all are looking for. But I do think it's difficult, as I said, because the good OCs become HCs in the league right now. And that does make it difficult for you to find that guy, keep him, and then keep an effective system. It can happen, but it's tough. It's tough. Andres Pete, I mean, the only drawback to Andres Pete is I know if I make an Andres Pete video, the first thing people are going to say is, yeah, well, he got injured, as if he has control over him getting a concussion. But I mean, he played really well. He really did. He played really well yesterday, or Sunday. It's Tuesday now. I haven't really slept in 48 hours because of my jobs. So, yeah. But if the Saints go to Curry and he doesn't do well, you can't simply go back to Carmichael. It's true, Mr. O. But my counterpoint to that is, at this point, with Pete Carmichael, do you think that he can ever be the guy? It kind of is like this conversation we keep having about quarterback, right? Do you ever believe that Pete Carmichael can be the guy? Right? Because when he's been in control of the offense, the best he's managed, this year the team is 25th in points. Last year they were 22nd. Right? When it comes to the rushing attack, here's actually where it gets kind of scary for me. Last year the New Orleans Saints were 19th in rushing. This year they're 25th. It's not even about the passing game, which the passing game this year is 21st. Even though they're 10th in attempts. That's what's scary. Saints offense is 10th in attempts this year passing game and 21st overall in yardage and everything. So it's like, do you really believe that you can get worse than Pete Carmichael? And I guess that there is a potential to be worse. But when I look at the Saints averaging 15 points a game, just put up 9 points against a divisional opponent, I really don't think that you can be worse. You can maybe be as bad, and it is possible that Ronald Curry could come in, have play calling duties, and be cheeks. But here's the difference. Ronald Curry's never done it. So you don't know. And he can only, in theory, get better. So even if he came out and he was bad, at least you see potential upside. Do you see upside in Pete Carmichael as a play caller? And that's the question you would have to answer when it comes to, should he be my guy? Keep in mind, Pete Carmichael is, should I say this because now people are going to unfollow the channel? I don't know if y'all know this. Pete Carmichael and me share the same birthday. We both have a birthday on Friday. My birthday's on Friday, October 6th, as is Pete Carmichael. He'll be turning 52. Do you believe Pete Carmichael at 52 is going to suddenly have a renaissance as a play caller and become an elite guy in his, early 50s? I'm not trying to sound ageist. I'm just trying to say that usually when you talk about a guy being an up-and-comer and who's going to find it, he's not 52 years old. If you're 52 and an offensive coordinator in the league, you're probably already good. Right? You're probably not going to suddenly be good. That's the difference between Ronald Curry for me. Because Ronald Curry is 15 years younger. He's never had the opportunity. Let's see. Yeah, Ronald Curry is, he's actually older than I thought he was. Ronald Curry is 44. I mean, he is 8 years younger, and he's never had the opportunity. And he did play in the league for 8 years, and a lot of NFL coaches that aren't players, well, those are the years that there is an assistant, like Shanahan. And people talk about nepotism, but Shanahan is an example of nepotism working out really, really well. So Shanahan being obviously Mike Shanahan's son. That time, nepotism worked out fantastic. But even then, he was an offensive coordinator all the way back in 2008, and he is only 43 now. So that would have been 15 years ago, which means at 28 years old, he was an offensive coordinator in the NFL, the same time that Ronald Curry was playing. And he worked his way up to being good, right? So you just got to give it a shot to see it happen. You thought he was 62? Yeah, it's that stress of running an NFL offense make Pete look older than he is, right? Makes him look older than he is. Look, guys, it's been crazy. I know it feels like it has been. We've already hit 1 hour, so we've got to wrap up the show so that we can get working on the film study. Let me know in Discord and Twitter what you want to see, and I'll start working on it. And honest to God, I might do an Andres Pete one because, I really do believe that he should be the left guard if he's healthy. We'll find out our first injury report tomorrow. Hope you all are enjoying the Who Dat Confessional podcast. I appreciate every single one of you. Thank you for giving me your time, the likes on the videos, the subscriptions, and sharing me out to the Whodats. Whodat, God bless. I will see y'all all on Thursday and a film study tomorrow. Deuces, that's me. Catch you later.